All right. Hello, everyone, and I hope I'm audible. Um, Welcome to Prajnya Equality Colloquium series. So, this is an annual speaker series that we do during the month of April to discuss issues relating to caste and gender. And today, we're very happy to have with us Dr. Darshan. They are a queer Ambedkarite reconstructive surgeon interested in leftist politics through a queer anti-caste intersectional lens. And um, they will be shedding some light today on how the current Savarna view of casteism starts and ends at reservations and poverty pornography of impoverished Dalits. So nothing makes a casteist spiral like the existence of a queer English-speaking Dalit with an iPhone. Hence the title of today's talk, The Dalit with an iPhone. Over to you, Dr. Darshan.
Hi, I am Dr. Darshan, a non-binary trans Ambedkarite. My pronouns are they, them, and I belong to a former untouchable caste. Talking to you today for the Prajnya Equity Colloquium series in celebration of Dalit History Month. Getting started, the reason I chose this title is to try to subvert a common narrative used by casters online in perpetuating the idea that a Dalit person who has achieved some level of economic forwardness is somehow no longer prone to the damaging effects of caste discrimination that, say, a more financially or educationally deprived Dalit of the same caste may be forced to face. That may be true in part. My economic mobility does help me pass, a term I borrowed from queer parlance, as a Savarna person by virtue of my presentation, either through my clothing, grooming, or accessories. But that also completely undermines the pernicious aspects of caste discrimination that pervades through these external paraphernalia, like a stench that only Savanna can somehow pick up. My access to Savanna dominated spaces, something my parents could only see as they entered government workspaces through reservations, but never could become a part of, meant I could now, mingle with my Savanna peers as colleagues, friends, and even partners. Though my own mother still had to eat separately since she was one of the two non-vegetarians, both SC. Among an office full of vegetarians, I now got to hang out at cool cafes and posh hotels, and you know, and here the divide became somewhat obvious. My Savarna friends' approach to spending money differed wildly from my own. They believed in spending it for pleasure, while I was taught to spend only on necessities. They could order full meals and not finish them. They had the luxury of not having to finish their meals that they ordered. But I still make sure every single dish of mine is completed because wasting food was taboo in a lower middle class Dalit household. I mean, wasn't interdining supposed to dilute away the poison of casteism? I did realize that despite us receiving the same education, our worldviews were vastly different. They talked about their yearly trips to far off places, while I listened fascinated and a bit embarrassed that my family never did that. They never, I mean, they invited me, my friends invited me to their homes in posh locations for pujas and parties, but I couldn't invite them to my house because I was too ashamed to tell them that I lived near a ghetto. Why, even the way I spoke Tamil, my mother tongue, was different from my Tambram friends, which I learned to hide since it was an easy giveaway of my identity. There's a certain dialect called Benson Town Tamil. It sounds a lot. It sounds similar, um, colloquially to North Madras Tamil, North Chennai Tamil, which is somewhat of a giveaway of someone's caste location. All of the differences became even more exaggerated um, around puberty. My slow realization of my own weirdness crept in. Of course, I knew I was different from other boys. As you can make out physically, an AMAP person assigned male at birth. But that I never bothered to dwell upon it. But that changed during my teen years because my burgeoning sexuality meant exploration of dating apps and my sudden drop into the belly of the gay hookup culture. And it was a head spinning experience. But there were still patterns to it. All the dating app profiles had different versions of the same slim, fair, manly, decent, good family lines, none of which I could check off from a list describing me. The complex interaction of colorism and casteism, class and culture, that was a sociological treasure trove, was still beyond the grasp of my young mind then. The next step, as any queer person, was to find my community. And this is where the gap seemed abysmal. The LGBTQI plus scene 10 years ago was dominated by Savarnas. Brahmin cis gay men and cis lesbians almost exclusively ruled it. This was, and perhaps probably still is, true in certain cities like Bangalore or Mumbai, where there's a stark um, division in terms of who gets to take a call on how certain pride related events are conducted. Savarna Siskis controlled the management and running of pride marches and all the related events, and they still do in Mumbai actually. And the question of inclusion was still very nascent back then, and was often undermined by curt answers like, "Why do you want to divide us queers on the basis of caste? You should be grateful for the work we are doing right now." Some of the older queers and some of the right wing queers still hold on to this, where they deny that there is actual casteism experienced by Dalit queers even now. The agenda of these pride events also focus more on making LGBTQI people more palatable for the mainstream cisgender heterosexual idea of normalcy by reducing the deviation from the norm that was, you know, historically and naturally inherent to queerness. The mainstream Ambedkarite discourse that we see today was also non-existent back then, which was almost as subaltern and underground as the queer movement. And the internet, of course, was like one of those babies we see on the Instagram reels, gurgling, spluttering, and still learning to walk. Early internet was both a boon and a bane because it allowed queer people to connect across geographical barriers and find partners and community, albeit it was, of course, only available to the privileged upper class Savarna engineers, right? While also introducing the straight world to the existence of queer people, and that made us vulnerable to abuse. This was also the time when movies and TV shows started grappling with the idea of the existence of queer people, and of course, they made a mockery of it, of us. And everyone surely remembers at least one queerphobic joke from the 2000 cinemas or serials, right? And what was undocumented though was similar treatment of Dalit issues. Caste slurs were freely used, and caste-based chat rooms were created. Then rose the magical beast, social media, which made it possible for anyone with a smartphone and a net pack access to anything in the world, thus making it possible for queer people from marginalized groups, hitherto with no chance of ever interacting with an upper class Savarna elite queer, now having to get to sit at the same metaphorical table. My own Ambedkarite awakening happened in one of these social media apps. Years after I faced all the discrimination that I did in school and college, having had no language to put it to words, the unique experiences that I faced. And I think a lot of us don't realize that Brahminical education system never exposes us to the ideas and the vernacular that is required for us to combat the sort of discrimination that we face as the Dalit person, and of course as a queer person as well. And one of the ways in which Brahmanism deprives Dalits of agency, of an identity, is through the deprivation of our own history. And so now that I was privy to all this Ambedkarite knowledge, this literature, all these voices of people who have had the same history, the same sort of background that I had, a lot of things started to make sense. I could now understand why, despite sharing the same educational and mental space with my peers, Savarna peers in the same classrooms, I still had that strange difference from how they experience the world. My complaints regarding certain issues were brushed aside as unimportant or even non existent. Say, for example, me being unable to come to some excursion or a trip or a tour because I didn't have the money to, or I didn't even have the proper clothes to wear to those events. But now with this sort of Now with the blue anti-caste lens, a lot of things became immediately like obvious to me. The fault lines of caste cut across the LGBTQI community, nearly dividing the Savarnas from the Dalits and Adivasis, almost like a perfect replication of cityscapes designed by Brahmin architects, dividing the slums from the Agraharas. Now, at present, queer spaces are almost exclusively Savarna dominated and classist, a far cry from the revolutionary black and Latin trans people and other people of color who literally kick-started the idea of pride. Now, events hosted by dating apps for meeting other queer people of a certain age group by companies like Tinder or Bumble have a vibrant array of queer people from across the spectrum of the LGBTQIA plus plus. But of course, picked only from the rich, educated Savarna background, wearing their exorbitantly priced, ironically leather fetish gear and splendid, glittery, euphoria inspired makeup, meeting up to discuss various geopolitical issues of queer people across the world. The troubles of dating at a certain age, dating beyond 30s, dating beyond 40s, or to test out new labels to describe the diversity in their queer lived experiences, while never bothering to ask why there were restrictions to entry for certain people based on their clothing styles or footwear, actively excluding poorer queers. I mean, and thereby dismantling the whole idea of a queer community. Because if there was the whole idea of pride, the whole idea of inclusivity is completely in shambles right now. This also, again, has led to a sort of development of resentment amongst certain cis male Dalit activists who now view queerness as an exclusively Savarna performance. As if Dalit and Adivasi Hijras and Tirunangai weren't the first to fight for the recognition of the rights of all queer people in India. I mean, a lot of us know that the scrapping of the Section 377 was rather pushed forward with the signing of the petition by a huge number of queer IITians and supposedly the work of Sanghi lawyers. But many of us know, but not many of us know that trans women like Grace Banu or Living Smile and hundreds of other trans women, hijras, who fought for and are still fighting for, say, things which perhaps matter to the more poorer, marginalized Dalit, queer people, hijras, and trans women, such as horizontal reservation or government recognition of name changes. All we see the media portray are the elite Savannah trans women flaunting their cosmetic surgeries and their money from OTT apps on their Instagram profiles, making more money from this identity that is now considered pleasing to the considered appealing to the Savarna palette. But there is not much that is being spoken about the struggle of other trans women, Dalit, Adivasi, marginalized, Pasmanda trans women, in say getting trans affirmative care. We're asked to laud the efforts of saffron lesbian lawyers fighting for gay rights, and we are told how pressing it is, the need for them to have recognition of gay marriages, to have their Instagram friendly weddings with their Sabyasachi inspired gowns and whatnot. But we are not told the need for say anti-hate crime bills or reservation for trans women or fast tracking transgender card applications. So Dalit queers right now are standing in this strange middle ground, between seeking belonging in our queerness among Savarnas who will never understand how caste privilege works, and how institutional it is in providing the sort of accessibility to not only say trans affirmative care or medication or treatment for their STI related issues, but also even the simple knowledge of the labels that are required to identify the vast diversity of say diversity of gender experiences or sexualities. and we are also again in a tussle between our Dalitness, where we are among Dalits who are wary of Savarnas, who have let Savarna queers, who have let them down over and over. And also, there is so much groundwork that needs to be done, in organizing and educating and agitating for our queer brethren, and in providing them access to safe sex, regular STI screenings, community contact tracing, provision of free ART drugs, giving unknown trans folks vocational training and free housing, accessible trans affirmative care, including psychiatric assistance and aid in getting transgender cards, and so much more. But the queer movement, as led by, say, the current crop of upper class Savarna cisgendered gay men and lesbians, seems to have shifted the focus from a more community oriented approach to our community related problems to a more individualistic approach, where the ideas of expression of our gender identity and sexuality in a severely queerphobic as well as casteist society has become a brunt upon ourselves. Because if we are not talking about the collective of wanting, say, gay marriages and going to parties and celebrating pride, wearing the fanciest clothes, and performing gender in a rather I hate to say this, but in a rather Western inspired way, is actually somewhat saddening to think about. But after saying all of this, I do have to admit that right now, at this present moment, I am hopeful because I see a lot of young queer Dalits becoming aware of the historical and contemporary injustices faced by both queer people and Dalits and Adivasis and other marginalized groups, including Pasmanda Muslims, Sikhs, and Buddhists. And they are forming a sort of synthesis of Ambedkarite ideology with queer activism. I'm also getting to see a lot of Ambedkarite queers who are now actively exposing the inherent Brahminical stranglehold on the academia from the inside, and we are finally getting to rewrite our histories to tell our stories, using our voices and our words, and this with this I can say that I see a new blue dawn on the horizon, and without having to prolong this sort of monologue, I think I will stop here, and by saying that Jai Bhim, and this year has been one of the more interesting Dalit History Months, where I have gotten to attend my first Bhim Jayanti celebration after college, and I'm finally getting to celebrate Bhim Jayanti celebration as well as my first Pride March. And I'm finally getting to celebrate both my identities together, and I'm finally seeing a change in the attitude, in the overall attitude of educated queer educated young queer people towards the issues of casteism, and how they are showing how Savarna queers are also learning to show solidarity through their understanding of privilege, their own privilege, and its extension. Extending it to help other people who may not share the same privileges, and that is making me hopeful. And with that, I'm done. I finished the monologue.
Thank you, uh, Dr. Darshan. I would hardly call that a monologue. It was so, um, thank you for um, um, sort of laying out for us in detail how identities within the queer community intersect, and how there is a lot of uh, power imbalances there. And um, because this really doesn't get talked about a lot when we speak about solidarity for the community itself. One is a fight of representing the community outside, and one is another fight of building solidarities within. Um, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And thank you, everybody who is here, who took their time to come and listen to Dr. Darshan speak.
Before we close, I just wanted to say that since it's recorded, that I would like to say that whatever PEC is doing a great job of it, and I think you should continue and you should proceed in that direction. I also would like to thank Sister Shalin, who's here right now, for introducing me to you and you to me and having me speak here. Thirdly, I cannot end this conversation without talking about the one person who gave me everything that I have right now, the person who allowed me to be who I am right now, as a queer person, as an equal citizen in the society, as well as a surgeon. That is Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And saying that, I want to say Jai Bhim and thank you for letting me speak.